The river swallowed her whole. Kira Okonkwo felt the Euphrates close over her head like a fist, muddy water flooding her nose and mouth as the explosion's shockwave tumbled her downstream. Her lungs burned. Her ears rang. Somewhere above the surface, her team was dying, and every current that dragged her further from the firefight was another second she could not afford to lose. But even as the river pulled her under, even as her oxygen ran out and her vision darkened at the edges, one thought cut through the chaos with perfect clarity. They think I am dead. They think it is over. They have no idea what I am about to do. 12 hours earlier, Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo had stepped off a helicopter at Forward Operating Base Falcon with sand in her teeth and orders in her hand. The Iraqi sun hammered down on the landing zone like a physical weight, and the rotor wash scattered dust across the small cluster of buildings that passed for an outpost in the Euphrates River Valley. She had been attached to SEAL Team 7 for a high-value target extraction. Her orders said combat medic. Her file said advanced qualifications. Neither document told the whole truth. Senior Chief Petty Officer Wade Crenshaw was waiting for her at the edge of the landing zone, arms crossed, jaws set like concrete. He was a big man, 15 years in the teams, 3 combat deployments, and the kind of weathered confidence that came from surviving everything the world had thrown at him. He looked at her assignment papers. He looked at her. The disappointment on his face was not subtle. A medic, he said. They sent us a medic. Kira kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting to men like Crenshaw only gave them ammunition. Combat medic, she said. Attached for the duration of the operation. Crenshaw made a sound that was not quite a laugh. We do not need a nurse. We need shooters. He turned and walked toward the Tactical Operations Center without waiting for a response. Stay out of the way and try not to get anyone killed. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have witnessed moments where someone was underestimated the way Kira is being underestimated right now. The TOC was cramped and hot, filled with the hum of electronics and the smell of stale coffee. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reyes stood at the center table, satellite imagery spread before him, pointing out approach routes to the assembled operators. He was Cuban-American, 12 years in special operations, and unlike Crenshaw, his eyes held no immediate judgment when he saw her enter. Just assessment, calculation, the look of a man who evaluated everyone by what they could contribute. The rest of the team filtered in around her. Petty Officer, Second Class Danny Yoon, the team sniper, lean and focused, with the quiet intensity of someone who spent his life looking through scopes. Petty Officer First Class Terrence Washington, who everyone called Big T, the breacher, built like a linebacker and carrying enough explosive ordnance to level a city block. Hospital Man Second Class Elena Vasquez, the junior medic, young and eager, who caught Kira's eye and offered a small smile of solidarity. And then there was Crenshaw, taking his position at Reyes's right hand, making it clear through posture alone that he was the real authority in this room regardless of what the rank structure said. Reyes began the briefing. Their target was a compound 15 kilometers northwest of Ramadi, nestled in the palm groves along the river. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was using it as a waypoint. They would insert by helicopter 3 clicks out, move on foot through the groves, cross the river at a designated point, and assault the compound at dawn. Clean. Simple. Textbook. Kira studied the satellite imagery while Reyes talked. The compound itself was unremarkable. Mud brick walls, central courtyard, single road access. Standard. But something in the surrounding terrain caught her attention. The reed beds along the river. The way they clustered at certain points. The patterns that looked natural but were not. She had seen patterns like that before, in a place she was not supposed to talk about. Doing things her file did not mention. Senior Chief, she said, and the room went quiet. Crenshaw turned slowly. The look on his face suggested she had just committed a serious breach of protocol by speaking at all. What? The reed beds at the crossing point. Kira pointed to the imagery. They are too regular. The clustering pattern suggests prepared positions. Someone has been cultivating cover along that approach. For a moment, Something flickered in Danny Yoon's eyes. Interest. Attention. But Crenshaw's voice drowned it out. Thank you for the agricultural analysis. He did not bother hiding his contempt. Maybe when we need someone to identify plants, we will call you. Until then, leave the tactical assessment to people who have actually done this before. Kira held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Long enough to make her point. Short enough to avoid insubordination. Yes, Senior Chief. The briefing continued. Routes were finalized. Assignments were distributed. Kira was placed in the center of the formation. Protected position. The spot where you put someone you do not expect to contribute. The spot where you put the nurse. Big T caught her eye as the team filed out to prep gear. He gave her a small nod. Not much. Just enough to let her know that someone had noticed. That someone was paying attention to the woman everyone else had already dismissed. That night, Kira checked her equipment in the dim light of the medical tent. Standard trauma kit. For supplies. Tourniquets. Everything a combat medic would carry. And strapped to her thigh in a waterproof bag, invisible under her uniform, 17 rounds of match-grade ammunition that had no business being in a medic's loadout. Vasquez found her there an hour before insertion. The younger woman was struggling with her pack straps, the adjustment mechanism fighting her smaller frame. Kira helped her without comment, fingers moving with practiced efficiency. When Vasquez's canteen turned out to be leaking, Kira shared her water without being asked. Thank you, Vasquez said. For everything. I know the Senior Chief is being difficult. Kira shrugged. I have dealt with difficult before. The helicopter lifted off at 0430, rotors beating against the pre-dawn darkness. Kira sat in the cargo bay, watching the other operators, reading their body language, assessing their capabilities the way she had been trained to assess everything. Crenshaw was experienced but rigid. Reyes was competent but deferential. Danny Yoon was skilled and observant. Maybe too observant. As if sensing her attention, Danny turned and studied her hands. The calluses, the wear patterns, the small signs that told a story her file did not contain. His eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to speak. But Crenshaw's voice cut through the rotor noise first. Remember, the medic stays in the rear. She's not here to fight. She's here to patch holes after we make them. Danny's question died unasked. But Kira saw it in his eyes. The suspicion. The recognition that something about her did not add up. He knew. He did not know what he knew, but he knew something. The helicopter banked toward the river valley, toward the palm groves, toward the reed beds that Kira knew were wrong, toward the crossing point where everything was about to fall apart. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust 3 kilometers from the river. Kira was moving before the skids settled, falling into formation with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. The other operators flowed around her, weapons up, eyes scanning the darkness. Nobody spoke. In the pre-dawn silence of the Euphrates Valley, sound carried like a death sentence. Crenshaw set a brutal pace through the palm groves. The terrain was uneven, root systems and irrigation ditches turning every step into a potential ankle break, and Kira understood immediately what he was doing. He wanted her to fall behind. He wanted proof that she did not belong here. Every time he glanced back, he was looking for weakness. He did not find it. She matched his pace step for step, her breathing controlled, her movements efficient. 3 years of being underestimated had taught her how to conserve energy while appearing to expend it. Let them think she was struggling. Let them think she was barely keeping up. The truth was something else entirely. Danny Yoon fell back from his position near the front, drifting until he was walking beside her. In the green glow of night vision, his face was unreadable, but his voice was pitched low enough that only she could hear. Your hands, he said. The calluses. They are not for medical equipment. Kira did not respond. I have been shooting for 12 years, Danny continued. I know what a trigger finger looks like. I know what a stock weld does to a cheekbone. You have both. Still she said nothing. Let him wonder. Let him theorize. The truth was classified 6 ways from Sunday, and even if she wanted to explain, she could not. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, whatever you are, you're not just a medic. And when this goes sideways, because it always goes sideways, I want to know what you can actually do." He moved back to his position before she could answer. Not that she would have. Some secrets kept you alive precisely because they stayed secret. The team reached the observation point overlooking the river crossing at 0600. The Euphrates stretched before them, silver and black in the growing light, maybe 60 meters wide at this point with reed beds clustered along both banks. The compound was visible a kilometer beyond, mud walls catching the first rays of dawn. Kira studied the reed beds through her night vision. The patterns she had seen in the satellite imagery were even more obvious from ground level. The way certain clusters were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. The way the natural vegetation had been augmented with camouflage netting, so subtle you would miss it if you were not looking for it. Someone had turned this crossing into a kill zone. She moved to Crenshaw's position. "Senior Chief, the reed beds. I told you already." Crenshaw cut her off without looking at her. "We do not need your input. There are prepared fighting positions in those clusters." Kira kept her voice level. "The vegetation pattern is wrong. Someone has been here. Recently." Crenshaw finally turned. In the dawn light, his face was hard as granite. "Let me explain something to you. I have crossed rivers under fire in 4 different countries. I have led men through ambushes that would make you cry. And I have never, not once, needed a nurse to tell me how to do my job." Reyes approached, sensing the tension. "Problem." "No problem," Crenshaw said. "The medic thinks she sees something in the reeds. Probably fish." Kira met Reyes's eyes. "Sir, I am asking you to look at the vegetation patterns. There are anomalies consistent with prepared positions." Reyes glanced at the reed beds, glanced at Crenshaw. The calculation in his eyes was obvious. He could overrule his senior enlisted operator on the word of an unknown medic, or he could trust 15 years of experience over instinct. He chose experience. "We proceed as planned. Crenshaw, get them ready to cross." The words settled in Kira's chest like stones. She had done what she could, raised the alarm, tried to warn them, and they had chosen not to listen. Big T appeared at her shoulder. His massive frame blocked her from Crenshaw's view for a moment. "I saw the patterns too," he said quietly. "You're not wrong. But being right does not matter if no one listens." He shrugged. "It will matter later, when they figure out what you are." The team formed up for the crossing. Standard tactical formation. Point man in the water first, followed by the main body in a staggered line, with rear security trailing. Kira was positioned in the center, surrounded by operators, protected from every angle. The safest spot in the formation. The spot for someone who could not protect themselves. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago. Before the program. Before the training that did not exist. Before James. James Henley had been her partner in the classified program. The only other graduate. He had believed in her when the instructors had doubted, pushed her when she wanted to quit, celebrated with her when they both made it through. They had been sent on their first real mission together. An operation in a country she still could not name, against targets that officially did not exist. She had made shots that day. 6 confirmed. 6 lives ended at distances that should have been impossible. But none of it had mattered because she could not save the one life that counted. James had taken a round through the throat. She had held pressure on the wound while returning fire, her rifle in one hand and his blood pouring through the fingers of the other. He had died looking at her, trusting her, believing until the last second that she would find a way. The program was shut down a week later. Her skills were classified. She was returned to regular medic duties, her record scrubbed of anything that might suggest she was more than she appeared. And for 3 years, she had stitched wounds and set bones while knowing she could prevent the injuries if anyone would just let her do what she had been trained to do. The point man entered the water. The current tugged at his legs as he waded toward the far bank, rifle held high, eyes on the reeds. Kira watched the reed beds, the clusters she had flagged, the patterns that screamed ambush to anyone willing to see them. The sun crested the horizon, painting the river gold and red. And then the world exploded. The RPG came from the largest reed cluster, trailing smoke as it screamed across the water and detonated 3 meters from the point man. The shockwave lifted him off his feet and threw him backward, and before his body hit the water, automatic weapons fire erupted from 3 different positions along the bank. Kira was moving before conscious thought caught up. She grabbed Vasquez and pulled her down into the shallow water as rounds cracked overhead, the distinctive snap of supersonic bullets passing close enough to feel. Around her, the team was scrambling for cover that did not exist, returning fire at muzzle flashes that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Crenshaw was screaming orders. Reyes was calling for air support. Big T was dragging a wounded operator toward the minimal cover of a submerged log. And Danny was trying to acquire targets through his scope, but the ambush was too well designed, the angles too perfect. They had walked into a kill zone, exactly like she had warned them. And now they were all going to die. Another RPG launched. Kira saw it coming, saw the smoke trail arcing toward their position, understood in the frozen instant before impact that there was no time to move. The explosion hit the water 5 meters away. The concussion wave slammed into her chest like a sledgehammer, and then she was tumbling, spinning, the river closing over her head as the current caught her body and dragged her downstream. Away from the fight, away from her team, away from everything she could do to help them. The last thing she saw before the water swallowed her completely was Danny's face, watching her disappear beneath the surface with the expression of a man who had just lost something he never knew he had. The Euphrates did not care about war. It did not care about ambushes or gunfire or the men dying along its banks. It simply flowed, ancient and indifferent, carrying Kira Okonkwo downstream like driftwood. She tumbled beneath the surface, disoriented, lungs burning. The current spun her in directions she could not track, slamming her against submerged rocks and dragging her through tangles of river vegetation. Somewhere above, muffled by water and distance, she could hear the staccato rhythm of automatic weapons. Her team was still fighting, still dying. Her boot caught on something solid. She pushed off hard, clawing toward the light, and broke the surface gasping. The current had carried her maybe 200 meters downstream, depositing her in a dense cluster of reeds along the eastern bank. She grabbed a fistful of vegetation and held on, fighting the river's pull while she forced air into her lungs. From here, she could see the kill zone. The team was pinned against a submerged sandbar, using the minimal elevation as cover while fire poured in from 3 directions. She counted bodies, 2 motionless in the shallows, 3 more moving, returning fire. Crenshaw was on his knees, blood streaming from his left leg, still shouting commands. Reyes was hunched over the radio, calling for support that was too far away to matter. And Danny was flat on his stomach, rifle extended, trying to find targets. But every time he lined up a shot, another burst of fire forced him back down. The ambush was too well coordinated, too professional. Whoever had designed this kill zone knew exactly what they were doing. Kira ran the numbers in her head. 8 to 10 shooters in prepared positions, overlapping fields of fire. Her team had maybe 5 effective guns left, pinned in open water with no cover and no way to maneuver. Air support was at least 15 minutes out. They would be dead in 5, unless something changed. She could swim downstream. The current would carry her to safety in minutes. She could find a patrol, report the ambush, bring help. By the time she returned, it would be over, but she would be alive. She would survive. James Henley had died because she could not save him. The guilt had lived in her chest for 3 years, a constant weight that never lifted. If she fled now, that weight would double, triple. It would crush her. She thought about the waterproof bag strapped to her thigh. 17 rounds of match-grade ammunition, useless without a rifle. She thought about the ridge overlooking the kill zone, 800 meters west, high ground with clear sight lines to every enemy position. If she could get there, if she could find a weapon, if she could do the impossible. The current tugged at her legs. Downstream meant safety. Upstream meant death. Kira released the reeds and began swimming toward the western bank. The next 10 minutes were a blur of mud and exhaustion. She crawled through reed beds, staying low, using the vegetation as concealment while gunfire echoed across the water. Twice she froze as insurgent fighters moved past her position, close enough to touch, their attention fixed on the trapped Americans. She did not breathe. She did not move. She became part of the river itself, invisible and silent. A body floated past her in the shallows. Insurgent, young, maybe 20, with a chest wound that had painted the water red around him. She did not know which of her teammates had made the shot, but she offered a silent thank you anyway. And then she saw the rifle. It was half submerged in the muck near the dead insurgent, an SVD Dragunov with a PSO-1 scope. Soviet era, reliable, accurate to 800 meters in the right hands. The stock was cracked and the barrel was caked with mud, but when she worked the action, it cycled smoothly. She checked the magazine. 7 rounds. Not match grade, but decent quality military ammunition. She stripped the rifle as quickly as the conditions allowed, cleaning mud from the critical components, verifying that the scope had not been knocked out of alignment. It was a rough weapon, poorly maintained, nothing like the precision instrument she had trained on. But it would shoot. And right now, that was all that mattered. The ridge was 800 meters away. To reach it, she would have to cross 200 meters of open ground, then climb a rocky slope while exposed to any enemy observer who happened to look in the wrong direction. Impossible. Suicidal terrain. She began to move, crawling through irrigation ditches, sprinting between palm trees, freezing behind rocks when movement caught her peripheral vision. Every second felt like an hour, and every meter felt like a mile. Her side burned where something had cut her during the initial explosion, blood seeping through her uniform, but she ignored it. Pain was just information, and the information was not relevant to completing the mission. Behind her, the gunfire intensified. She heard Crenshaw's voice on the radio, bleeding through her waterlogged earpiece. The words were broken, fragmented, but the message was clear. Command, be advised. We are down to 4 effective. They are maneuvering to finish us. If support does not arrive in 10 mics, there will be no one left to support. 10 minutes. She had 10 minutes to cover 400 meters of open terrain, reach the ridge, establish a firing position, and eliminate enough targets to break the ambush. She was halfway there when the sentry found her. He came around a boulder without warning. AK-47 rising toward her chest, mouth opening to shout in alarm. Kira did not think. 3 years of training that did not exist took over, her body moving faster than conscious thought. She closed the distance before he could fire, driving her palm into his throat, collapsing his airway. The AK discharged into the dirt as he fell backward, and then she was on top of him, driving his own knife into the soft space beneath his jaw. He died quietly. She took his magazine and kept moving. The ridge was close now. 50 meters. 30. 20. Her lungs burned and her legs screamed, and the wound in her side had gone from seeping to flowing, but none of it mattered. Nothing mattered except reaching that high ground. She pulled herself over the final rocks and collapsed into a natural depression at the ridgeline. Below her, spread out like a tactical diagram, the entire ambush was visible. Her team pinned against the sandbar, the insurgent positions in the reed beds. And there, moving forward with the confidence of a man who had already won, the leader. He was tall, composed, wearing civilian clothes that did not hide his military bearing. He moved like a soldier, commanded like an officer. This was no random insurgent. This was a professional. Kira settled the Dragunov stock against her shoulder, pressed her cheek to the worn wood, and found him in the scope. 800 meters. Crosswind from the east. Shooting downhill into chaos with a rifle she had never fired. Every instructor she had ever trained with would have called it impossible. But impossible was exactly what they had prepared her for in that classified program. The program that did not exist. The program that had taken everything from her and given her only one thing in return. The ability to do what no one believed she could do. She controlled her breathing, steadied her heartbeat, let the world narrow to nothing but the crosshairs and the target. One chance. No margin for error. Her finger found the trigger. 800 meters below, Farid al-Rashid walked among his men with the satisfaction of a craftsman admiring his finest work. The Americans were finished. Pinned in the open water, bleeding out, their calls for help echoing uselessly across frequencies he had been monitoring for weeks. He had killed 3 American units with this river. This would be his 4th. They called him the Gardener, a name he had chosen himself, because gardens required patience. You prepared the soil. You planted the seeds. You waited for the right moment to harvest. And now, watching the last of the American operators huddle behind their pathetic sandbar, the harvest was nearly complete. He raised his hand, signaling his men to begin the final push. 3 teams would advance simultaneously, pouring fire into the kill zone from multiple angles. The Americans would have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They would die in the water like rats. One of his lieutenants approached. "Commander, one of the bodies was swept downstream. A woman. Should we send men to confirm the kill?" Al-Rashid considered. The woman had been in the center of the formation. Protected position. Probably a medic or translator. No threat. The river would finish her if the explosion had not. "Leave her," he said. "The fish will find her soon enough." He turned back to the kill zone, raising his radio to give the final order. He never heard the shot that killed him. The round crossed 800 meters in less than a second, entering through his chest and exiting through his spine. He was dead before his body hit the ground, the radio falling from his fingers into the mud. For a frozen moment, nobody moved. His men stared at their fallen commander, uncomprehending. There had been no warning, no sound of a helicopter, no indication of another American unit in the area. Just a single shot from nowhere, and the Gardener was gone. Then the second shot came. The insurgent sniper positioned on the eastern bank had been lining up a kill shot on Daniyun. He never got the chance. The round took him through the temple, snapping his head sideways, dropping him into the reeds. Panic began to spread. The third shot eliminated the RPG gunner who was preparing to fire another rocket into the American position. He crumpled over his weapon, the launcher discharging harmlessly into the water as his dying fingers spasmed on the trigger. On the sandbar, Crenshaw was screaming into the radio. "Command, confirm air support on station. Someone is shooting. Confirm our support is engaging." The response crackled through broken speakers. "Negative, Viper element. No assets on station. Say again, no friendly air in your vicinity." Reyes looked up from the radio, confusion and hope warring on his face. Then who the hell is shooting? Danny had gone still. His rifle was down, jammed and useless, but his eyes were working, scanning the terrain, looking for the source of the fire that was saving their lives. He found it, a muzzle flash on the ridge, 800 meters west. He watched through his scope as another shot launched, tracked it all the way to impact, saw a 4th insurgent fall. "That is not air support," he said, his voice strange. "That is a sniper. 800 meters. In this wind." The ambush was unraveling. Without their commander, without their supporting weapons, the insurgent fighters began to hesitate. Some continued firing at the Americans. Others looked for the new threat. A few began to withdraw, unwilling to die for a battle that had suddenly turned against them. But Danny was not watching the insurgents anymore. He was watching the ridge, counting shots, measuring distances, running calculations that did not add up. "That is not just a sniper," he said. "That is someone who knows exactly what they are doing at ranges I can barely see." Crenshaw dragged himself to Danny's position, leg still bleeding, face pale with blood loss. "What are you talking about? Who was up there?" Danny did not answer immediately. He was thinking about the helicopter ride, about the calluses he had noticed on certain hands, about the way a certain medic had moved through the palm groves with the efficiency of someone who had done it 100 times before. "It is Okonkwo," he said finally. "It has to be." Crenshaw stared at him. "The medic. The nurse. You think the nurse is making shots at 800 meters with a rifle she does not have?" Another muzzle flash from the ridge. Another insurgent dropped in the reeds. Danny watched the trajectory, calculated the wind compensation, estimated the skill required. "I do not think it," he said. "I know it." On the ridge, Kira worked the Dragunov's bolt and found her next target. The rifle was fighting her. The action was sticky, the scope was slightly off-center, and the ammunition was inconsistent enough that every shot required a fresh calculation. But she had trained for worse. She had trained for impossible. 6 rounds fired. 6 confirmed kills. She had 1 round left in the magazine, plus the extra magazine she had taken from the sentry. 13 rounds total. The insurgents were beginning to scatter now, the organized ambush degenerating into chaos. Some were still fighting. Others were running. A few were trying to locate her position, firing blind toward the ridge in hopes of suppressing her. She ignored the incoming rounds. At this range, with those weapons, they had almost no chance of hitting her. The bigger concern was ammunition. Every shot had to count. Every round had to end a threat. She found her next target, an insurgent with a radio, crawling toward the reed bed where al-Rashid had fallen. If he reached that radio, he could call for reinforcements. The ambush would become a siege. She lined up the shot. 850 meters. Moving target. Her lungs ached, and her wound throbbed, and exhaustion pulled at her muscles like weights. She fired. The insurgent collapsed 3 feet from the radio, his hand still outstretched toward the device he would never reach. 7 shots. 7 kills. Below, the tide had turned completely. The insurgents were in full retreat now, abandoning positions they had spent weeks preparing, fleeing from a threat they could not see and could not fight. Crenshaw was organizing the survivors, getting the wounded to cover, establishing security for the extraction that would finally be possible. And Danny was still staring at the ridge, watching each muzzle flash with the expression of a man whose entire understanding of the world had just shifted beneath his feet. She was never just a medic, he said to no one in particular. She was never just anything. On the ridge, Kira lowered the rifle and allowed herself one moment of stillness. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline and blood loss taking their toll. She had maybe 10 minutes of useful consciousness left before her body gave out. But she had done it. She had risen from the river, and she had ended the ambush. The rest could wait until she woke up. The extraction helicopters arrived 18 minutes after Kira's last shot. By then, the surviving insurgents had melted into the palm groves, leaving behind their dead and the shattered remains of an ambush that should have succeeded. Crenshaw had established a casualty collection point on the eastern bank, and the grim work of sorting the living from the dead had begun. 2 SEALs had died in the initial RPG blast. A third had bled out in the water before anyone could reach him. Big T had taken a round through the shoulder, but was still moving, still helping drag wounded men to cover with his one good arm. Vasquez was working on the casualties with the focused intensity of someone who would process the trauma later, when there was time. Reyes coordinated the extraction, his voice hoarse from shouting commands over the radio. Get the wounded on the first bird. I want security teams sweeping the perimeter. And someone find out what the hell happened on that ridge. Danny was already moving. He had handed off his jammed rifle to another operator and was climbing the rocky slope with nothing but a sidearm and a growing certainty that everything he thought he knew was wrong. The ridge was steeper than it looked from below. Loose rocks shifted under his boots, threatening to send him tumbling with every step. He was exhausted, dehydrated, running on adrenaline and stubbornness. But he had to know. He found her in a natural depression near the crest, unconscious, the battered Dragunov still clutched in her hands. Blood had soaked through her uniform on the left side, and her face was pale beneath the mud and river water. For a terrible moment, he thought she was dead. Then she stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening as training overrode exhaustion. The rifle came up before she fully recognized him, muzzle centering on his chest with a speed that made his breath catch. Easy, he said. It is Yoon. You're safe. She stared at him for a long moment. Then the rifle lowered, and something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. Did it work? Danny looked down at the kill zone, at the bodies scattered through the reeds, at his teammates, alive because of what this woman had done from an impossible distance with an impossible weapon. Yeah, he said. It worked. He helped her to her feet, taking most of her weight as her legs threatened to give out. The wound in her side was worse than he had realized, blood still seeping despite the pressure she had been applying. She needed medical attention immediately. "How many?" she asked as they began the descent. "How many what? How many did I hit?" Danny considered lying. Considered softening the truth the way you did for people who were not ready to hear what they had done. But this woman had just saved his life with 7 shots across 800 meters of a rocky desert. She deserved better than comfortable fictions. 7 confirmed, he said, including their commander, RPG gunner, sniper. The rest were fighters maneuvering for the final assault. She nodded once, absorbing the information without visible reaction. The numbers mattered. The faces would not. She had learned that lesson a long time ago, in a program that taught you to count impacts instead of souls. They reached the base of the ridge as the first helicopter was lifting off with the critically wounded. Big T saw them coming and moved to intercept, his good arm reaching out to take Kira's weight from Danny. "I knew it," Big T said, his deep voice rough with something that sounded almost like emotion. "First day you walked onto that FOB, I knew there was something different about you." Kira did not respond. Her eyes were losing focus again, consciousness slipping away as blood loss and exhaustion finally overwhelmed her. "Get a medic," Danny shouted. "Vasquez, get over here now." But Vasquez was already running, trauma kit in hand, her earlier tears replaced by the cold efficiency of training. She reached Kira just as the woman's legs gave out completely, catching her, lowering her to the ground, hands already working to expose and treat the wound. "Stay with me, Chief," Vasquez said. "You do not get to save everyone and then die on us. That is not how this works." Kira's lips moved. The words were too quiet to hear, but Vasquez leaned closer. "James," Kira whispered. "Tell James the first I'm sorry." Vasquez looked up at Danny, confusion on her face. Danny, he shook his head. He did not know who James was. He did not know anything about this woman, except that she had just performed a miracle with a dead man's rifle. The second helicopter touched down in a storm of dust. Crenshaw limped toward them, his leg wrapped in a hasty bandage, his face a complicated mixture of emotions that Danny could not fully read. For a long moment, the senior chief just stared at Kira's unconscious form, at the Dragunov lying beside her, at the blood-soaked uniform and the hands that had saved all of their lives. Then he spoke, and his voice was nothing like the dismissive growl Danny had heard for the past 12 hours. "Get her on that bird," Crenshaw said. "She goes with the priority wounded, and someone secure that rifle. I want ballistics confirmation on every shot she made." Danny blinked. "Senior Chief." Crenshaw met his eyes. "Whatever her file says, whatever her orders say, that woman just made shots that I have seen snipers with 20 years experience miss. She did it wounded, alone, with a weapon she pulled out of the mud." He paused, something shifting in his expression. "I called her nurse. I told her to stay out of the way. And she saved my entire team." Danny had no response to that. There was nothing to say. The truth was lying on the ground in front of them, bleeding out beyond argument or denial. They loaded Kira onto the helicopter alongside the other wounded. Vasquez stayed with her, maintaining pressure on the wound, monitoring vitals with the focus of someone who understood that this patient mattered more than most. As the bird lifted off, Danny looked back at the ridge one last time. 800 meters, 7 shots, 7 kills, in conditions that would have made most snipers refuse to fire at all. Whoever had trained Kira Okonkwo had created something extraordinary, something that did not officially exist, something that had just changed everything he thought he knew about what was possible. And as the helicopter banked toward forward operating base Falcon, Danny made himself a promise. He was going to find out the truth, all of it, no matter how many classified files he had to dig through, because someone capable of what he had just witnessed did not come from nowhere. And the story behind her was going to be worth hearing. Kira woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a heart monitor. The ceiling above her was corrugated metal, and the light filtering through dusty windows had the flat quality of late afternoon. She was in the medical bay at FOB Falcon. She was alive. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her left side, sharp enough to steal her breath. She looked down and saw bandages wrapped tight around her torso, the white gauze spotted with dry blood. "Easy, Chief," a familiar voice from her right. "You lost about 2 pints out there. The doctors say you are lucky to be conscious at all." Kira turned her head. Crenshaw sat in a folding chair beside her bed, his left leg extended and wrapped in bandages of his own. He looked exhausted, older than he had seemed just 24 hours ago. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. The contempt was gone. Something else had taken its place. "How long?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp. 16 hours. They flew you to the surgical unit at Al-Assad, patched you up, and flew you back. The doctors wanted to keep you longer, but apparently you have some very interested people who want to talk to you. Kira processed that. Interested people meant questions. Questions meant the classified program she had spent 3 years trying to forget. "The team," she said. "Casualties." Crenshaw's jaw tightened. 3 Kia. Henderson, Polk, and Martinez. 2 more wounded bad enough for stateside evac. Big T is going to be fine. Vasquez is shaken but holding together. 3 dead. 3 men who might have lived if someone had listened to her warning about the reed beds. 3 families who would receive folded flags and empty condolences. She closed her eyes against the weight of it. "It should have been more," Crenshaw said quietly. "It should have been all of us. Would have been if not for you." She opened her eyes. He was looking at her with an expression she had never expected to see on his face. Respect. Genuine, hard-won respect. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "I have been doing this job for 15 years. I thought I knew what a shooter looked like. I thought I knew what belonged in a combat zone and what did not." He paused, and she could see how much the next words cost him. "I was wrong. About you. About a lot of things." Kira studied him for a long moment. She could hold onto the anger, could remind him of every dismissive comment, every time he had talked over her, every moment he had made her feel like less than nothing. She would have been justified, but justified was not the same as useful, and she was too tired for grudges. "You will know better next time," she said simply. He laughed. It was a rough sound, surprised out of him. "Yeah, I guess I will." The door to the medical bay opened, and Danny Yun stepped inside. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee, and his eyes went immediately to Kira. "She is awake," he said, handing 1 cup to Crenshaw. "Good. I have questions." Crenshaw took the coffee and pushed himself to his feet. His wounded leg made the movement awkward, but he managed. "I will give you 2 some space." He looked at Kira one more time. "Whatever your story is, Chief, it is yours to tell. But I want you to know that as far as I am concerned, you earned a place on any team in special operations. Any team at all." He limped out of the medical bay, leaving Kira alone with Danny. Danny pulled the chair closer to her bed and sat down. For a moment, he just looked at her, the same assessing gaze he had turned on her during the helicopter ride. But now there was something else in his expression. Recognition. Understanding. 7 shots, he said. 800 meters average. Crosswind. Downhill, with a rifle you pulled out of the river. I have been shooting competitively since I was 16. I have trained with the best snipers in the military, and I could not have made those shots. Kira said nothing. "Who trained you?" Danny asked. "Who made you what you are?" The question hung in the air between them. She could refuse to answer, could hide behind classification and security clearances. But Danny had seen what she could do. He had climbed that ridge to find her. He deserved at least part of the truth. 3 years ago, there was a program. Joint operation between Navy and Marine Corps. The idea was to create combat medics with advanced marksmanship capability. Operators who could save lives and take them with equal proficiency. Danny leaned forward. "I have never heard of anything like that." "You would not have. It was classified from the start. 6 candidates were selected. Only 2 of us graduated." She paused, and the old pain rose up at her chest. "Me and a man named James Henley." The name she had whispered when she was losing consciousness. Danny remembered. "What happened to him?" he asked. "Our first real mission. A country I still cannot name, against targets that did not officially exist." She stared at the ceiling, seeing a different sky. A different time. "We were successful. I made 6 confirmed kills that day. But James took a round through the throat during extraction. I tried to save him. I held pressure on the wound while I was still returning fire. But the damage was too severe. He died in my arms. Danny was silent. There was nothing to say. The program was shut down a week later. Kira continued. My skills were classified. My records were scrubbed. I was returned to regular medic duties and told to forget everything I had learned. For 3 years, I've been stitching wounds and setting bones while knowing I could prevent the injuries if anyone would just let me do what I was trained to do. She turned her head to look at him directly. That is who I am. That is what made me. A program that does not exist and a partner I could not save. Danny sat back in his chair, processing everything she had told him. The pieces fit together now. The calluses, the way she moved, the impossible shots on the ridge. The program may be dead, he said slowly, but what they created is not. You proved that yesterday. Kira closed her eyes. Yesterday felt like a lifetime ago. I did not do it for proof, she said. I did it because my team was dying and I was the only one who could stop it. Danny nodded. That is exactly why you should be doing this. Not to prove anything to anyone. Because you are capable of things most people cannot even imagine. He stood up, leaving his untouched coffee on the table beside her bed. Get some rest, Chief. When you are recovered, there are going to be people who want to talk to you. Important people. And I have a feeling your days of being invisible are over. He walked to the door, then paused. For what it is worth, he said without turning around, I am glad you rose from that river. I am glad you were there. Then he was gone, and Kira was alone with the beeping monitors and the weight of everything she had carried for 3 years. James Henley had believed in her when no one else did. He had died believing she would find a way. And yesterday, she had finally proven him right. She let the tears come. Just this once. Just in the privacy of this empty room. Then she wiped her eyes and began planning for whatever came next. The sun had set by the time Kira felt strong enough to walk. She moved slowly through the FOB, one hand pressed against her bandaged side, navigating by the glow of generator-powered lights strung between buildings. The base was quieter than usual. Word of the ambush had spread, and even those who had not been there seemed to move with a heaviness that matched the loss. She found Big T sitting alone on a stack of supply crates near the motor pool, his injured arm in a sling, a cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. He looked up when she approached, and something in his face softened. Should you be walking around? He asked. Probably not. She lowered herself onto the crate beside him, wincing at the pull in her side. But I have never been good at staying still. Big T nodded slowly. He was not a man of many words, but the silence between them was comfortable. They had shared something on that riverbank. Something that did not require explanation. I knew, he said finally. The first day you showed up. The way you checked sight lines when you walked into the TOC. The way you positioned yourself near exits. That is not medic training. That is operator instinct. Kira watched the cigarette smoke curl into the darkness. Why did you not say anything? It was not my place. He shrugged with his good shoulder. Figured you had your reasons for keeping quiet. Figured those reasons were none of my business. She appreciated that. The respect of someone who understood that secrets existed for a reason, and that trust was earned through patience rather than demanded through interrogation. Henderson had a daughter, Big T said quietly. Polk was 3 months from retirement. Martinez just got engaged last month. He was going to ask for leave to go home and meet her parents. Kira closed her eyes. The weight of the names pressed down on her chest. I tried to warn them, she said. About the reed beds. About the ambush. I know. I heard you. Big T flicked ash from his cigarette. Crenshaw did not want to hear it. Reyes did not want to override his senior NCO. And 3 men died because listening to a woman they did not respect was harder than walking into a trap. The bitterness in his voice surprised her. She turned to look at him. You sound like you have experience with that. He met her eyes. I'm a 6'4" black man in special operations. You think I do not know what it feels like to have people look past me? To have them decide who I am before I open my mouth? He took a long drag from his cigarette. The difference is, I am big enough that they have to see me eventually. You, they could pretend you were invisible forever. But not anymore. No. He almost smiled. Not after what you did on that ridge. Now, they have to see you whether they want to or not. Footsteps approached across the gravel. Vasquez appeared from between the buildings, her medical kit slung over her shoulder, her young face drawn with exhaustion. She stopped when she saw Kira. "Chief, you should be in bed." Kira shrugged. "So everyone keeps telling me." Vasquez hesitated, then moved closer. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands trembled slightly as she set down her kit. The collected efficiency from a battlefield was gone, replaced by the raw vulnerability of someone who had finally stopped long enough to feel everything she had been pushing aside. "I keep seeing them," Vasquez said softly. "Henderson and Polk and Martinez. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. If I had been faster. If I had been better." Kira recognized the spiral. She had lived in it for 3 years after James. "Come here," she said. Vasquez sat on the crate beside her, and Kira put an arm around the younger woman's shoulders. The movement pulled at her wound, but she ignored it. "You did everything right," Kira said. "You kept your hands steady when others would have frozen. You treated the wounded while rounds were still flying. You saved lives today, but I could not save all of them. No one could save all of them." Kira's voice was quiet but firm. "That is the hardest lesson this job teaches. You do everything right, and sometimes people still die. The guilt will tell you that you failed. The guilt is wrong." Vasquez was crying now, silent tears tracking through the dust on her face. Big T reached over and squeezed her uninjured shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that transcended words. They sat together in the darkness, 3 people bound by what they had survived. The weight of loss pressed down on all of them, but somehow, sharing it made it bearable. "You saved us," Vasquez said finally, looking at Kira, when everyone else had given up, when even the senior chief thought it was over. "You saved us." Kira thought about the river, about the moment she had released the reeds and started swimming upstream instead of down, about the choice that it felt less like bravery and more like the only thing she could live with. "I did what I was trained to do," she said. "I just wish someone had let me do it sooner." Big T stubbed out his cigarette. "From what I hear, that is about to change. Word is there are people flying in tomorrow. Important people. The kind who make decisions about where operators get assigned." Kira had expected as much. Her days of anonymity were over. The question now was what would replace them. "Whatever happens," she said, "I want you both to know something. Out there, when everything went wrong, you were the ones who kept fighting. You were the ones who gave me time to reach that ridge. If you had broken, if you had run, none of what I did would have mattered." Big T nodded slowly. "We are a team. That is what teams do." Vasquez wiped her eyes. "Will you still be part of this team? After the important people come?" Kira did not have an answer. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, what decisions would be made about her future, what new path her life might take. But she knew one thing with certainty. "Whatever I am," she said, "wherever they send me, what happened on that river will always connect us. We survived something together. That does not go away." The stars were emerging overhead, bright and cold against the desert sky. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter drummed through the darkness, carrying wounded or supplies or reinforcements. The war continued whether any of them were ready for it or not. But for now, in this moment, 3 survivors sat together and let the silence hold them. Tomorrow would bring questions and decisions and the weight of official attention. Tonight was for remembering the ones they had lost and honoring the bonds they had forged. Kira looked up at the stars and thought of James Henley, 3 years gone. She hoped he could see her now. She hoped he knew that everything he had believed about her had finally been proven true. And she hoped, wherever he was, that he was proud. The helicopter arrived at 0900, kicking up a storm of dust that sent everyone on the FOB scrambling for cover. Kira watched from the doorway of the medical bay as 2 figures emerged from the aircraft. One wore the eagles of a Navy captain. The other was in civilian clothes that did nothing to hide his military bearing. Danny appeared at her shoulder. "JSOC," he said quietly. "Joint Special Operations Command. The civilian is intelligence. Probably CIA or something adjacent." Kira had expected scrutiny. She had not expected it to arrive this quickly or at this level. They were escorted to the Tactical Operations Center, and within minutes, a runner appeared at the medical bay door. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, your presence is requested. She followed the runner across the FOB, acutely aware of the eyes tracking her movement. Word had spread. Everyone knew what she had done on a ridge. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The TOC had been cleared except for the two visitors, Lieutenant Commander Reyes and Senior Chief Crenshaw. The captain stood at the center table, satellite imagery spread before him. The civilian leaned against the wall, watching everything with eyes that missed nothing. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, the captain said, I am Captain William Harris, JSOC Liaison. This is Mr. Cole from the intelligence community. Please sit. Kira took the offered chair, keeping her posture straight despite the pull in her wounded side. She had been in enough command situations to know that this was not a casual conversation. I have read the after-action reports, Captain Harris continued. I have reviewed the ballistics analysis. I have spoken with Lieutenant Commander Reyes and Senior Chief Crenshaw about what occurred at that river crossing. He paused, studying her face. What I cannot find anywhere in your official file is an explanation for how a combat medic made 7 confirmed kills at an average distance of 800 meters with a salvaged enemy weapon. Kira said nothing. The question was not really a question. It was an invitation to fill a silence, and she had learned long ago that silence was often the smarter choice. Mr. Cole pushed off from the wall. We know about the program, Chief. Project Nightingale. Joint Navy-Marine initiative to create dual-capability operators. 6 candidates selected. 2 graduated. 1 killed in action during the first operational deployment. He tilted his head slightly. And 1 buried so deep in classified paperwork that it took us 6 hours to confirm she even existed. The name hit her like a physical blow. Nightingale. She had not heard it spoken aloud in 3 years. The program that had made her. The program that had taken everything from her. The program was terminated, she said carefully. My skills were deemed surplus to requirements. Mr. Cole smiled without warmth. Your skills were deemed politically inconvenient. There's a difference. A female sniper operating at the level you demonstrated creates questions that certain people in the Pentagon did not want to answer. So they buried you, stuck you in a medic billet where no one would ever see what you could do. Kira felt anger rising in her chest. She forced it down. Getting emotional in front of these men would not help her situation. Why are you here? She asked directly. Captain Harris exchanged a glance with Mr. Cole. Because the man you killed on that riverbank was not a random insurgent. He was Farid al-Rashid, known as the Gardener, former Iraqi Special Forces, one of the most effective tactical commanders the insurgency has produced. He was responsible for the deaths of 43 American service members over the past 2 years. Kira absorbed that information. She had not known who he was when she pulled the trigger. It would not have changed anything if she had. Al-Rashid was part of a larger network, Mr. Cole continued. A network that is currently planning operations that could destabilize the entire region. With him dead, that network is in chaos. But it will not stay that way for long. His lieutenants are already maneuvering to take control. You want to hit them while they are disorganized, Kira said, before they can regroup. Captain Harris nodded. We have intelligence suggesting 2 of his key lieutenants will be meeting within the next 48 hours. A coordinated strike could eliminate them both and effectively destroy what remains of the network. And you need shooters. We need operators who can perform at extreme range under adverse conditions. Mr. Cole's eyes were steady on hers. We need someone who can do what you did on that ridge. Not once, but consistently. As part of a team that understands your capabilities and can deploy them effectively. The offer hung in the air. Everything she had wanted for 3 years, handed to her in a single conversation. Kira looked at Reyes. At Crenshaw. Both men were watching her with expressions she could not fully read. What about my current assignment? She asked. Reyes spoke for the first time. If you accept this, you will be detached from SEAL Team 7 immediately. Reassigned to a joint task force under Captain Harris's command. He paused. For what it is worth, I think you should take it. You were wasted as a medic. We all saw that, even if some of us took longer to admit it than others. Crenshaw shifted in his chair. His wounded leg was clearly bothering him, but he met her eyes without flinching. I spent 15 years believing I knew what a shooter looked like, he said. Believing I knew what belonged in combat and what did not. You proved me wrong in about 11 minutes. He shook his head slowly. I do not know what the right answer is here, but I know that if you stay buried in a medic billet, the military is wasting one of the most talented operators I have ever seen. And I do not say that lightly. Kira considered everything she had heard. The opportunity, the risks, the chance to finally do what she had been trained for, openly, without hiding. If I do this, she said to Captain Harris, I have one condition. Name it. When I see something, you listen. I do not care about rank or experience or ego. If I identify a threat, you take it seriously. She held his gaze. I tried to warn this team about the ambush. I was ignored. 3 men died because my input was dismissed. That does not happen again. Captain Harris studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Agreed, he said. Your input will be valued, Chief. You have my word. Kira stood, ignoring the pain in her side. Then I am in. When do we start? Mr. Cole checked his watch. The briefing is in 2 hours. We have a lot of ground to cover and not much time to cover it. He headed for the door, Captain Harris following. Kira moved to join them, but Crenshaw's voice stopped her. Okonkwo. She turned. Give them hell, he said. For the first time since the river, Kira smiled. I intend to. The briefing room was smaller than the TOC, windowless and secure, with maps covering every wall and a digital display showing real-time satellite imagery. Kira took her seat at the table and felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This was not the protected position in the middle of a formation. This was the seat where decisions were made and opinions mattered. Danny was already there, along with 4 operators she did not recognize. Captain Harris stood at the head of the table, and Mr. Cole worked a laptop connected to the main display. Listen up, Captain Harris began. 48 hours ago, Farid al-Rashid was eliminated during a failed ambush on SEAL Team 7. His death has created a power vacuum in one of the most dangerous insurgent networks in the region. 2 of his lieutenants are now competing for control. The display changed to show 2 photographs. The first was a heavy-set man with a thick beard and cold eyes. The second was younger, clean-shaven, with the look of someone who had studied at universities before he studied warfare. Mahmoud Qasim, Captain Harris continued, pointing to the first image. Former Republican Guard. Brutal, effective, responsible for the IED campaign that killed 18 Americans in Fallujah last year. And Tariq Nazari, educated in London, recruited by Al-Qaeda, now serving as the network's strategic planner. Between them, they have the capability to rebuild everything al-Rashid created and make it worse. Mr. Cole took over. Intelligence indicates they are meeting tomorrow night to negotiate a power-sharing agreement. A compound on the outskirts of Ramadi. Heavy security, but predictable patterns. We have a 12-hour window to plan and execute a strike that eliminates both targets simultaneously. Danny leaned forward. Assault team insertion. Negative. Mr. Cole shook his head. The compound is too well defended for a direct approach. Casualties would be unacceptable. Instead, we are proposing a long-range interdiction. He looked at Kira. Chief Okonkwo will establish an overwatch position 2,100 meters from the target. When both principals are confirmed in the courtyard, she takes the shots. 2,100 meters. The number hung in the air. At the river, she had been shooting at 800. This was nearly 3 times that distance. At that range, a bullet took almost 3 seconds to reach its target. Wind, humidity, elevation, even the rotation of the Earth became factors. It was the kind of shot that defined careers or ended them. One of the operators she did not recognize spoke up. A hard-faced man with a Ranger tab on his sleeve. No disrespect, but that is an impossible shot. Even with perfect conditions, you are talking about variables that cannot be controlled. Kira met his eyes. I have made shots at that range before, in conditions that were not perfect. The Ranger looked skeptical. Training is not combat. She did not blink. I was not talking about training. Captain Harris intervened before the tension could escalate. Chief Okonkwo will have a spotter. Petty Officer Yoon has volunteered. The rest of the team will provide security for the hide position and prepare for extraction. He looked around the table. This is a high-risk operation with a high-value payoff. If we succeed, we eliminate 2 of the most dangerous men in the insurgency. If we fail, we lose operators in hostile territory with no quick reaction force available. Danny spoke quietly. What about support? Air assets. Limited. Mr. Cole pulled up another map. We will have a helicopter on standby, 15 minutes out, but the approach is through contested airspace. If things go wrong, extraction will be complicated. The weight of the mission settled over the room. This was not a standard operation. This was a precision strike with no margin for error, dependent entirely on Kira's ability to do something most people considered impossible. Captain Harris turned to her. Chief Okonkwo, this is your call. If you do not think you can make these shots, we need to know now. We will find another approach. Every eye in the room was on her. The ranger who doubted her. The operators who did not know her. Danny, who had seen what she could do and believed. Captain Harris, waiting for an answer that would determine whether this mission lived or died. Kira thought about the ridge overlooking the river, about the battered Dragunov and the impossible angles, about James Henley, who had died believing in her potential. She thought about the 43 Americans al-Rashid had killed, about the hundreds more who would die if his network was allowed to rebuild. I can make the shots, she said. Get me to that position, and I will end this. Captain Harris nodded. Then we launch at 0200. Get some rest, everyone. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. The briefing broke up, operators filing out to prepare equipment and steal whatever sleep they could. Danny lingered until they were alone. 2100 meters, he said. That is not a shot. That is a statement. Kira stood, testing her wounded side. The pain was still there, but manageable. Adrenaline would handle the rest when the time came. I have spent 3 years being invisible, she said. Making shots no one would ever see. Being capable of things no one would ever know. She met his eyes. Tomorrow, I make a statement that cannot be ignored. Tomorrow, I prove that everything they tried to bury was real. Danny nodded slowly. I will be right beside you. Calling wind, confirming range. Whatever you need. What I need is for you to trust me. Even when the math says the shot is impossible. Even when every instinct tells you it cannot be done. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. I saw you rise from that river, he said. I saw you save an entire team with a dead man's rifle. Trust is not the issue anymore. She shook his hand. The grip was firm, the understanding mutual. 0200, she said. Do not be late. She walked out of the briefing room and into the night air. The stars were bright overhead, the same stars she had watched the night before while mourning the dead and honoring the living. Tomorrow she would lie in the dirt 2100 meters from 2 men who had built an empire on American blood. She would control her breathing, steady her heartbeat, and do what she had been created to do. One shot, then another, and a network built on death would die with its leaders. James, she whispered to the darkness. Watch this one. This one is for you. The hide position was a shallow depression in the rocky terrain, concealed by scrub brush and the natural contours of the land. Kira had spent 6 hours perfecting it, arranging every stone and branch to break up her silhouette while maintaining clear sight lines to the compound below. Danny lay beside her. I pressed to a spotting scope, reading the wind through the shimmer of desert heat. 2100 meters. The compound sprawled across her scope like a model, tiny figures moving between buildings, vehicles arriving and departing through the main gate. Security was heavy but predictable, just as Mr. Cole had promised. Roving patrols on 15-minute cycles. Static positions at the corners. A courtyard in the center where, according to intelligence, the meeting would take place. Wind is 6 to 8 from the northeast, Danny murmured, gusting to 12. Temperature is climbing. You're going to get mirage distortion in the next hour. Kira made the mental adjustments. At this distance, every variable mattered. A 2-degree shift in wind could push around 3 feet off target. A temperature change could alter ballistic trajectory. She had to account for everything the physics demanded and then trust her instincts for everything the physics could not predict. The rifle beneath her was not the battered Dragunov from the river. Captain Harris had provided a Chaytak M200 intervention, chambered in .408 caliber, specifically designed for extreme long-range precision. She had spent 4 hours the previous night zeroing the scope, learning the trigger, making the weapon an extension of her body. It was a beautiful instrument. Now she had to prove she was worthy of it. Movement at the gate, Danny said. 3 vehicles, SUVs with armed escort. Kira tracked the convoy through her scope as it entered the compound. The vehicles stopped near the main building, and men began emerging. Security first, fanning out to reinforce the existing positions. Then the principals. Mahmoud Qasim was unmistakable. Heavy-set, bearded, moving with the arrogance of a man who had killed without consequence for years. He paused to speak with one of his lieutenants, gesturing toward the courtyard. Primary target confirmed, Danny said. Qasim is on site. Kira kept her breathing steady. 1 target down. 1 to go. The wait stretched into minutes. The sun climbed higher, and the mirage effect Danny had predicted began to shimmer across the compound. Kira adjusted her scope, compensating for the visual distortion while maintaining her focus on the courtyard entrance. Second convoy, Danny announced. Coming from the east. This one was smaller. 2 vehicles, less security. Tariq Nazari did not command the same resources as Qasim, but what he lacked in muscle, he made up for in intellect. He was the planner, the strategist. In some ways, he was more dangerous than his rival. The vehicles entered the compound and parked near Qasim's convoy. Nazari emerged, younger than Kira had expected, dressed in Western clothing that seemed out of place among the armed men surrounding him. He walked toward the courtyard where Qasim waited. Secondary target confirmed, Danny said. Both principals are converging on the courtyard. Kira settled deeper into her position. The moment was approaching. Everything she had trained for, everything she had survived, came down to the next few minutes. The 2 men met in the center of the courtyard. Qasim extended his hand, and Nazari shook it. A gesture of alliance. A symbol of the power they intended to build together on the graves of American soldiers. Both targets stationary, Danny said. Range confirmed at 2,100 meters. Wind holding at 7 from the northeast. You're clear to engage. Kira placed her crosshairs on Qasim's chest. Center mass. The largest target area. At this distance, precision was more important than ambition. She exhaled slowly, letting her heartbeat settle into the rhythm she had practiced 10,000 times. The world narrowed to the scope and the target. The courtyard. The 2 men. The crosshairs steady on flesh and bone. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the suppressor muffling the report to a heavy thump. The round left the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second, climbing into the desert sky before arcing downward towards target. 2.7 seconds of flight time. An eternity in which anything could change. Qasim dropped. The impact was visible even at this distance, his body crumpling as the round tore through his chest. For a frozen moment, no one in the courtyard moved. They did not understand what had happened. They had not heard the shot. Hit, Danny confirmed. Primary target is down. Kira was already shifting. Nazari had half a second of confusion left before survival instinct took over. She found him in the scope, adjusted for the slight change in angle, and fired again. The second round crossed 2,100 meters of a rocky desert and struck Tariq Nazari in the center of his back as he turned to flee. He pitched forward and did not move. Hit, Danny said, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief. Secondary target is down. Both principals eliminated. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Security personnel scrambled for cover, weapons raised, searching for a threat they could not locate. At 2,100 meters, they had no hope of finding her. By the time they organized a response, she would be gone. 2 shots, Danny breathed. 2 kills. 2,100 meters. Kira lowered the rifle, and allowed herself one moment of stillness. The weight of what she had done pressed against her chest, but she pushed it aside. There would be time for processing later. Now, there was only the mission. "Pack it up," she said. "We need to move before they figure out where those shots came from." Danny was already collapsing the spotting scope, his movements quick and efficient. The security team would be dispatching search parties within minutes. Their window for clean extraction was closing. They moved through the rocks in silence, heading for the rally point where the rest of the team waited. Behind them, the compound was in chaos. Sirens wailed. Men shouted. A network that had taken years to build was dying with its leaders. Kira did not look back. She had made her statement. She had proven what she was capable of. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead watched from, James Henley was finally at peace. The helicopter was waiting when they reached the rally point. Captain Harris stood at the door, his expression unreadable as Kira approached. "Report," he said. "2 confirmed kills," Kira replied. "Qasim and Nazari. Both eliminated." Captain Harris studied her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face. Something that looked almost like respect. "Outstanding work, Chief." He stepped aside to let her board. "Outstanding work." The helicopter lifted off into the dawn sky, carrying them away from the compound and the bodies and the shattered remnants of an empire built on blood. Kira leaned her head against the bulkhead and closed her eyes. It was done. The network was broken, and she had risen, once again, to do what no one believed she could do. The ceremony was held 3 weeks later at a forward operating base large enough to accommodate the brass who had flown in from Kuwait and Qatar. Kira stood at attention in a freshly pressed uniform, her side still tender but healing well. As a colonel, she had never met red citations she barely heard. The words washed over her. Extraordinary valor. Exceptional skill under fire. Actions directly responsible for saving the lives of multiple American service members. Elimination of high-value targets critical to regional security. The language was formal, precise, designed to capture heroism in bureaucratic terms that could be filed and forgotten. But the medal the colonel pinned to her chest was real. Bronze Star with Valor. The same decoration that hung on the chests of operators who had spent decades proving themselves in combat. And now it was hers. The assembled personnel applauded. Kira saw familiar faces in the crowd. Big T, his arm finally out of the sling, clapping with both hands. Vasquez, tears streaming down her face, smiling so wide it looked painful. Danny, standing near the back, offering a small nod of acknowledgement that meant more than any medal ever could. And Crenshaw, still on crutches, still weeks away from returning to full duty, but present. He had insisted on being there, had pulled strings and called in favors to secure transport from FOB Falcon. When their eyes met, he gave her a slight tip of his head. Respect, hard-won and genuine. The colonel finished speaking and shook her hand. "Congratulations, Chief Okonkwo. You have earned this." "Thank you, sir." The ceremony dissolved into informal mingling. Officers and enlisted mixed in the awkward way they always did at these events, bound by shared purpose but separated by the invisible walls of rank. Kira accepted handshakes and congratulations with practiced grace, counting the minutes until she could escape. Big T reached her first. His massive hand engulfed hers as he pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her healing wound. "Proud of you," he said simply. "Always knew you had something special. Glad the rest of the world finally caught on." Vasquez was next, practically vibrating with emotion. "I cannot believe I get to say I served with you. When I tell people what you did, they do not believe me. They think I am exaggerating." Kira smiled. "Tell them the truth. Let them believe what they want." The younger woman hugged her fiercely. "You changed everything. For me. For all of us. We are never going to see female operators the same way again." Kira hoped that was true. She hoped the door she had kicked open would stay open for others. But she knew better than to assume one act of heroism could undo decades of institutional bias. The fight would continue long after the medal ceremony was forgotten. Danny appeared at her elbow as the crowd began to thin. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, and he offered one to her without comment. How does it feel, he asked, being visible? Kira considered the question. 3 years of invisibility. 3 years of being dismissed and underestimated and relegated to roles that wasted her capabilities. And now this. Recognition. Respect. A medal that said, the military finally saw her for what she was. Strange, she admitted. Good, but strange. I spent so long trying to prove myself that I am not sure what comes next. Danny nodded. I have something for you. Something that might help with that. He reached into his pocket and produced a small cloth patch, worn and faded, with an emblem Kira recognized immediately. Project Nightingale. The program insignia that only 2 people had ever earned the right to wear. Where did you get this? She breathed. I made some calls. Did some digging. Found James Henley's family. Danny held the patch out to her. They wanted you to have it. They said he would have wanted you to have it. Kira took the patch with trembling fingers. The fabric was soft from years of handling, the edges frayed where it had been sewn and re-sewn onto different uniforms. James had worn this. James had believed in this program, in her, in what they could accomplish together. The tears came before she could stop them. 3 years of grief, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of carrying the weight of his death alone. It all broke free in that moment, in that dusty FOB, holding the last physical remnant of the man who had believed in her first. Danny said nothing. He simply stood beside her, a steady presence while she processed the storm of emotions. I never got to say goodbye, Kira whispered. He died looking at me, trusting me, and I never got to tell him that I would keep going, that I would not let what he taught me disappear. You just told him, Danny said quietly. Every shot you made, every life you saved. He heard you. Kira wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The patch felt warm against her palm, as if some echo of James still lived within its threads. Crenshaw appeared, navigating his crutches across the uneven ground with the determination of a man who refused to let injury slow him down. He stopped in front of Kira and studied her for a long moment. I wrote a letter, he said, to JSOC, to the promotion board, to everyone who would listen. Kira blinks. A letter. About you. Crenshaw's jaw tightened, as if the words cost him something to speak. About how I failed you. How my assumptions nearly got my entire team killed. And about how you saved us anyway, despite every reason you had to let us die. Senior Chief, you did not have to do that. Yes, I did. He met her eyes. I have spent 15 years building a reputation on being right, on knowing what I was doing. And in 11 minutes, you showed me that everything I thought I knew was incomplete. He paused. I will spend the rest of my career trying to make up for that, starting with making sure no one ever dismisses you again. Kira did not know what to say. The man who had called her a nurse, who had told her to stay out of the way, was now advocating for a future with the same intensity he had once used to dismiss her. Thank you, she managed. Crenshaw nodded once, then turned and crutched away, leaving Kira alone with Danny and the weight of everything that had changed. New orders came through, Danny said. They want you attached to a classified unit. Longue interdiction spécialiste. The kind of work you were born to do. Kira looked at the patch in her hand, at the medal on her chest, at the people around her who had finally learned to see her clearly. Then I guess I should pack my gear, she said. Danny smiled. I already packed it for you. Helicopter leaves in 2 hours. Of course it does. She pocketed the patch, straightened her uniform, and walked toward the future she had spent 3 years earning. Behind her, the ceremony grounds emptied. The brass flew back to their comfortable headquarters. The enlisted returned to their duties. And the story of what happened on the river began to spread, growing with each telling, becoming legend. But Kira did not need legend. She had something better. She had the truth. And the truth was finally free. 3 months had passed since the river. 3 months of operations Kira could never discuss, in places that did not appear on official maps, against targets whose names would never be released. She had become what Project Nightingale had always intended her to be, a ghost with a rifle, a solution to problems that could not be solved any other way. The unit she worked with now understood her capabilities. There were no dismissive comments, no assumptions based on gender, no request for her to stay in the rear. When she spoke, they listened. When she identified a threat, they acted. The hard-won respect she had earned on that Iraqi ridge had followed her into every briefing room and hide position since. She was lying prone on a rooftop in a city she could not name, watching a street 300 meters below when the call came through her earpiece. Overwatch, target is moving. South side of the plaza. Confirmed visual. Kira adjusted her scope and found the man they had been hunting for 6 weeks. A bomb maker responsible for attacks across 3 countries. He walked with the casual confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable, surrounded by bodyguards who scanned the crowd but never thought to look up. Visual confirmed, she said. I have a shot. You are cleared hot. She exhaled, steadied her crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger. The suppressed rifle coughed once. 300 meters away, the bomb maker crumpled to the pavement, and his bodyguards scattered in panic, searching for a threat they would never find. Target down, Kira reported. Proceeding to extraction. She broke down her rifle with practiced efficiency and disappeared into the urban maze before anyone thought to check the rooftops. 20 minutes later, she was on a helicopter heading toward a carrier group in international waters. Another mission complete. Another life saved by taking one. The carrier was bustling with activity when she landed. Flight operations continued around the clock, jets launching and recovering in an endless cycle of controlled chaos. Kira navigated through the organized madness to the quarter she had been assigned, stripped off her gear, and allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. Her phone buzzed. A message from Danny. Heard about your work today. Still making the impossible look easy. Miss having you on Overwatch. She smiled and typed a reply. Miss having you call Wind. These new spotters do not have your poetry. His response came quickly. Poetry? I was just reading numbers. You made them sound like Shakespeare. She pocketed the phone and made her way to the ship's observation deck. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. She leaned against the railing and let the salt breeze wash over her. So much had changed since that morning at FOB Falcon. The woman who had stepped off the helicopter, dismissed and underestimated, no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had proven herself in the most demanding conditions imaginable. Someone who had risen from a river and changed the course of a battle. Someone who had made shots that would be studied in sniper schools for decades. But the external validation, as satisfying as it was, mattered less than she had expected. What mattered was knowing the truth about herself. Knowing that when everything fell apart, when the team was dying and hope was gone, she had found the strength to act. Not for recognition, not for medals, for the simple reason that she could not live with herself if she did not try. Excuse me, Chief Okonkwo. Kira turned. A young sailor stood a few feet away, female, maybe 19, with the nervous energy of someone approaching a hero they had heard stories about. Yes, the sailor swallowed hard. I am Seaman Rodriguez. I just wanted to say, I have heard about what you did. At the river. And after. She paused, gathering courage. I want to apply for special operations training. Everyone tells me I cannot do it. That women do not belong in those roles. But when I heard about you, I thought maybe they were wrong. Kira studied the young woman, saw the determination in her eyes, the hunger to prove herself, the fear that she might not be good enough. What is your rate? Kira asked. Hospital corpsman. Same as you were. The symmetry was not lost on her. A young medic, standing where Kira had once stood, wondering if she had what it took to be something more. Let me tell you something, Rodriguez. Kira turned to face her fully. They will underestimate you. They will dismiss you. They will put you in positions where they think you belong instead of where you should be. And when they do, you rise. You rise, and you show them what they could not see. The sailor's eyes widened. That is exactly what they said you did. Rose from the river when everyone thought you were dead. Kira nodded slowly. The river was just the beginning. Every day after that was a choice. To keep rising. To keep proving. Not for them. For myself. She paused. If you have that in you, if you can make that choice every single day, then nothing they say matters. You'll find a way. Rodriguez straightened, something kindling in her expression. "Thank you, Chief. I will not forget this." She saluted and hurried away, leaving Kira alone with the sunset and the memories of everyone who had brought her to this moment. James Henley, who had believed in her first. Big T and Vasquez, who had seen her clearly when others could not. Danny, who had climbed a ridge to find her and had never stopped seeing her as an equal since. Even Crenshaw, whose hard-won respect had meant more than any medal. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most. Maybe your favorite moment or character. Or tell us about a time when you or someone you know proved the doubters wrong. We would love to hear your story. The sun touched the horizon, spreading fire across the water. Kira reached in her pocket and pulled out the faded patch Danny had given her. Project Nightingale. James's patch, her inheritance from a program that no longer existed and a partner who had died believing in her. She pressed the fabric to her lips, then tucked it back into her pocket, close to her heart. The Euphrates was thousands of miles behind her now, the river where they had left her for dead, the river from which she had risen. Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo watched the sun disappear beneath the Pacific horizon and let herself feel something she had not felt in years. Not pride, not validation, just peace. She had risen from the river, and she would keep rising for as long as there were battles to fight and doubters to prove wrong. The end was just another beginning, and she was ready.